Vamos a abrir la mirada a lo largo del mundo para ver cómo se encuentra la situación económica en estos momentos. Dean Turner, Chief Europe and UK Economist at UBS Global Wealth Management Chief Investment Office. Dean, thanks for having this time for us. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
What's your opinion about the global markets now?
So in terms of the global markets, clearly there's been quite a strong recovery, and with markets hitting an all-time highs, there's clearly some concern building about how sustainable this is. In our view, given the momentum and strength of the global economic recovery, and we should be aware that when we're looking outside of Europe, so for example when we're looking towards China and looking towards the US, there's quite a powerful pickup in activity. We think that Europe can follow in due course. In our view, that's quite a conducive environment for global equities. So in our view, it's still the right position to remain invested and have exposure to this cyclical upswing. But perhaps it's time to start thinking about rotating away from some of those stocks that have led the rally and start looking for some more opportunities elsewhere. And one area we particularly like at the moment are the emerging markets.
How could affect the situation between the fight between United Kingdom and Europe in global markets and in Europe in more focused on
So clearly a lot of the data that we had last week points to some tensions easing into the new trade relationship between the UK and the Eurozone. I think we would be naive if we think that this isn't going to continue for some months. Clearly there's a lot of tensions to be thrashed out, but I still take the view that what we're seeing will just be short-term headwinds as the UK and the European Union settle into this new trading relationship. I expect things to stabilize. They will stabilize at a lower level. That there are no winners from the new arrangement. But I don't think we need to be overly pessimistic about the long-term outlook.
And is there any problem related to inflation? Today we are watching Jerome Powell talking about the situation, and inflation is one of these problems.
That's correct. It was interesting. There was a global, very closely followed global survey yesterday where pointing to inflation is now the #1 concern for investors globally. And when we look at market indicators of inflation expectations, it's fair to say that they have risen a lot in recent times. I would make 2 points here, though. The first, just looking at those market level of inflation expectations, what we're seeing is not really a surge in inflation. It's really just levels of inflation, or expected inflation, I should say, are back to levels that we were at pre-pandemic in most instances. A little bit higher in the US, but not meaningfully. Now, in terms of the outlook, what are we expecting to see? Yes, headline inflation indices will rise in the short term. A lot of that is due to base effects. Just think of the price of oil. We only have to think back to last April when the price of oil was less than $20. In fact, it actually went negative on one day last year. Compare that to today, where we're close to $70. Clearly, there's going to be a short-term impact. But in my mind, it will be short-term. As we look into towards the end of this year and moving into 2022, those base effects will fade, and we are still in a situation where a global economy is still recovering from the pandemic. So I would expect that inflation settles down. We could be close to central bank targets, but I'm not expecting to see that inflation rises meaningfully above it.
And I understand that there are no problem about central banks hike these interest rates for the inflation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so clearly that's the key concern here, especially with the Federal Reserve meeting today. We had the ECB last week, the Bank of England tomorrow. The communication that I expect we're going to see is very much one of, banks were willing to tolerate a short-term overshoot in inflation because they do have that focus on the medium term, and the medium term, as I described earlier, is one where inflation is likely to be manageable. So I'm not expecting to see any dramatic moves from the central banks anytime soon.
What's your opinion about new taxes in UK in 2023?
Yeah, so in terms of the announcement regarding taxes, I mean, clearly it's quite a big hike that the UK could see. The reason I say could see is because, this is still some way off. I think the UK Chancellor has taken a bit of a gamble. He's going for a short-term fiscal stimulus, which is something close to 3% of GDP. If that is successful, along with the vaccination in the program in the UK in terms of opening the UK economy up, then we could see a recovery that is sufficiently strong that means that the corporation tax rate doesn't have to go as high as 25%. It's going up, that's without a doubt, but I would keep an open mind as to what level it finally settles at. It's going up, but 25%, I think the jury's still out there.
For investors in the midterm?
Yeah, so I think looking, taking out the short-term noise, I think there's three key things that we're saying investors should be positioning for over the medium term. The first is, we should be preparing portfolios for the next phase of the recovery. In my mind, that's thinking more about cyclicals. What has led this recovery in terms of tech and the COVID winners is likely to transition into something that's much more broad-based as that economic recovery takes hold. The second thing is that we should be ready for this hunt for yield. Investors are still craving yield on assets, and that probably favors again looking at areas outside of the ultra safe haven government bonds. And the final big theme that I think as investors we should be focusing on in the medium term is to prepare for a weaker dollar. A global economic upswing that we're expected to see should give investors more confidence to diversify out of the US dollar, as typically happens when we have a strong global economy. So that favors a number of currencies, but two I would highlight in particular is that it should be quite beneficial for the euro and for the pound against the US dollar over the medium term.
Thanks for all. We are seeing this weak dollar, as a key important for investors now. Dean Turner, Chief Eurozone and UK Economist at UBS, Global Wealth Management and Chief Investment Office. Dean, good morning, good business, good day.
Thank you, good morning.
Ese vistazo a lo que está sucediendo en la economía global, esa clave importante que nos está poniendo UBS encima de la mesa, ese dólar débil que hoy ya se ve en la relación euro-dólar, con un movimiento en el que el euro se está fortaleciendo, y esa clave que nos está diciendo Dean, importante a la hora de ver y gestionar cartera.